Today's recipe is a special request from the Casablanca My Moroccan Food, and we're going to do a version of kefta and lentil shakshuka. The kefta being meatballs, but we won't be using meatballs in this particular recipe. Now what the recipe says is you can use tinned lentils. In this particular case we're actually going to make the lentils ourselves, some dried lentils, and I'll show you that first. So as I said, you can buy tins of lentils which are pre-cooked and makes the recipe simple, but maybe a bit too salty and less tasty. So I'm actually going to use, in this case, brown lentils. You can use green lentils, and I'm going to weigh out a quantity of these and give them a good rinse under the tap. So I've weighed out 200 grams of brown lentils, dry brown ground, into the sieve, and now I'm just going to give them a good rinse under the cold water tap. Now the washed lentils have gone into the pan with 750 ml of water. I've taken 1 red chilli and 2 garlic cloves and sliced them. So I'm going to add them to the pan along with the equivalent of 2 stock cubes. I don't need anything else. There's enough salt in the stock cubes to add the flavour, and this will add also a bit of flavour to the lentils. So that's everything in the pan. I'm going to cover the pan and then turn the heat on to about medium heat, and then bring that to the boil, and then we'll let it simmer, and it will probably take a good 40 minutes, maybe up to an hour, to cook the lentils. Brought the lentils to boil. I'm just going to leave the cover on and let them simmer now. Like I said, for probably 40 minutes to up to an hour, but we'll check on them every 15 minutes. The lentils are simmering away. They've been going about 20 minutes. You can see they've puffed up a little. Just check the water, make sure the lentils are still covered. If it looks a bit too watery after another 20 minutes, we'll leave the lid off, but for the time being I'm going to put the lid back on and leave that to get going, and we'll get on with the sauce. So we're going to make a spicy tomato sauce. We've got a tin of chopped tomatoes, just 1 tin, 3 garlic cloves, paprika. Now I'm going to use hot paprika, but you could also use mild if you don't want it too spicy. Cumin, black pepper, some sugar and some salt. So first of all we're going to chop the 3 cloves of garlic and put them in with some olive oil to fry gently in a frying pan. The chopped garlic, 3 cloves, added to olive oil, about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in a medium heated frying pan, quite a deep one here. And to that we're going to add chopped tomatoes, and we're going to give that a stir, and then we're going to add the spices. And the spices, we need 1 teaspoonful of paprika, 1 teaspoonful of cumin. I've added the cumin, the paprika. I've also added half a teaspoon of salt, table salt, half a teaspoonful of sugar, and half a teaspoonful of the black pepper with garlic. And we're just giving this a stir, and we're just going to let that reduce down a little. I've also got some passata left over from Friday night pizza, so it seems a shame to let that go to waste. So I'm also going to add that into the mix, which gives it a bit more of a tomatoey base. If you don't have passata, use maybe 2-3 tablespoonfuls of tomato puree. Now, kefta are meatballs, spicy meatballs. It's quite actually difficult to get vegetarian meatballs in Switzerland. So as an alternative, I'm actually using these sausages. So I'm going to put them in the oven just to cook them before chopping them up into kind of meatball sized. So you can use sausage, you can use meatballs, you can use vegetarian meatballs, you can access them, and you can also make them yourself following a recipe. But the cheapest way of doing this is to use pre-cooked vegetarian sausages. The sausages have gone into the oven at 200 degree fan. They are frozen, so they'll probably take a good 10-15 minutes to cook. So we'll have a look at them. The lentils are cooking nicely. Nicely pumped up. They've had about 40 minutes. I'm going to put the lid back on and let them go for another 20 minutes. And the tomato sauce is bubbling away nicely. I'm just going to let that thicken up, so probably another 5-10 minutes just to thicken that up so everything's coming together nicely. The lentils have had about 45-50 minutes, so they're looking a little wet. See, there's quite a lot of liquid, but they've plumped up nicely, they're nice and soft. So I'm just going to take the lid off, turn up the heat and just boil off some of that excess liquid. So we don't need all these lentils. I made double quantities so we can use some for another recipe later in the week, but what I'm going to do is just transfer half the quantity into the tomato sauce, so just using a ladle. You can see it's slightly sloppy. You don't want these too dry, you want a little bit of liquid but nice and soft. Just ladle in until you've got about half of it. That's about half. One more, and then that can go into a dish and into the fridge and to be used for another recipe. So now I'm going to just stir in the lentils in here and just let that simmer gently while we wait for the sausages to cook in the oven. Sausages have been cooked in the oven and now I've just sliced them into thick slices, and we're going to add this to the tomatoey lentil sauce and stir them in. Sausage or meatballs have been stirred into the sauce, and now the exciting bit, we're going to crack an egg. So one per person, so there's 2 of us having this, so we'll put 2 eggs and then we'll put a lid on it. So 2 eggs cracked open and put on top of the sauce. I'm going to add a lid and let the eggs cook, probably take 3-4 minutes. Just add about 5 minutes under the lid and you can see the eggs have cooked nicely. That is ready to serve, and what we're going to do is we're going to serve it. So flatbreads, here I've got some pita bread that's been in the toaster, so nicely warmed, and a little bit of coriander roughly chopped as a garnish. So they served it with the egg, you've got your flatbread, pita bread and your coriander garnish, and there it is, ready to eat. Enjoy!